Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to Upper Roommates. It is I, Connor Nolan, joined by Andrew Orozco, the other part of the Upper Roommates. Andrew, how you doing
The
today?
guy, the guy in the other part of the room.
The other part of the room that slept on my floor and
Mm,
lives, what, 4 hours away from me?
about it depends on how much traffic there is. About 4 hours. We got to
Yeah,
do it
it's
from the
always,
same room one day.
yeah, well, next
Maybe
weekend.
maybe the next episode actually.
Yeah, the next episode will probably be in person because we'll be, unless we record from two separate rooms in the same house. Andrew's coming down to visit me next week,
Yeah, God
which
willing.
will be a lot of fun. We're gonna go hang out, but we'll probably record an episode in person, and it'll look
Mm.
really janky. But
Off of like the horrible Wi-Fi. Yeah.
anyways, so today we're talking about liturgy and how that's super important for culture. But we should probably explain what liturgy is. Andrew made that good point that we should probably explain what liturgy is. And Andrew, why don't you explain it? Because you could probably systematize it much better than I can.
Yeah, so basically liturgy just means the public worship of God. Like we're all called to worship God. We can do it like in our own bedrooms as a private family. You have your prayers before meals. But liturgy is how you as a community, a group of the public, come together and you worship God. You give God what God is due. Like remember in the last episode we talked about there's this virtue called justice. Justice is giving somebody what they deserve. Part of justice is giving God what God deserves, and God, being infinitely good, deserves infinite, or he can give him. He deserves as much love as we can give him. We're finite, but liturgy is the way as we as finite creatures who are designed for Him worship Him as a culture and as a society, essentially.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to talk about this today because Andrew and I were kind of throwing around some ideas of like what we were gonna do for this episode, and we talked about a little bit, um, maybe seeing what Catholicism in America in 2026 is gonna look like, but that's honestly so hard to predict. And like one of the main things that kind of came to mind for me was is that Pope Leo called a consistory of the cardinals to Rome, right? The consistory is where like Pope Leo calls a bunch of cardinals to come down. They have a meeting to discuss a certain topic, and this one's actually on the sacred liturgy, um, right on the mass. That's the common term for what us Western Christians would call liturgy. Eastern
Mm-hmm.
Christians would call it divine liturgy, right? And so, but I mean, still the same Eucharist. Uh, and so I think this is really important because, and we're gonna get into this. It's the basis of culture, right? There's a famous book called by a famous philosopher named Joseph Pieper. It called Leisure is the Basis of Culture. We're gonna get into that a little bit today, but I thought that this would actually be super important to talk about because as I said last episode, we're at an inflection point, right? And the liturgy is probably one of the most contentious points in the church right now, right? You and I are both big Latin Mass guys, right? I don't attend Latin Mass every single Sunday for familial reasons, right? My wife and I do like to attend Mass sometimes at a Novus Ordo parish for with my in-laws, but uh, most of the time, her and I really, really prefer going to Latin Mass, and so that's a big contentious point in the church right now. And Pope Leo's made some comments. You know, uh, I'm really paraphrasing here. I have a article from Crux magazine where essentially he talked about. Hold on, I'll pull it up right now. He talked about essentially like you could still celebrate the mass in Latin, right? He said, this is a quote. Um, people say the Latin Mass. Well, you could say Mass in Latin right now. If it's the Vatican II rite, there's no problem. Close quote. So
Mm-hmm.
the problem with that is that you know, I actually like Pope Leo. I don't think he's like. I think that I felt kind of a sigh of relief. I don't hate Pope Francis or anything. Pope Francis was the Pope, and I love and pray for him, right? But obviously, like you and I both felt some, and a lot of Catholics of our persuasion felt some tension under the pontificate of Pope Francis, unfortunately. when it came especially to the Latin Mass. Um, and I don't want to make this like a super Latin Mass oriented episode. I want this to be a the importance of liturgy and culture episode. But I just kind of want to clear this out of the way, right? Because I think this has to do with it. It has to do with what we're talking about. And the problem is that I don't think a lot of people in the older generation, like that boomerish generation, because Pope Leo is a boomer, right? He's a boomer from
Hmm.
the south, I believe, the south side of Chicago, right? So he is a boomer, and he's like, yeah, you could celebrate the Latin Mass, but you could say the Novus Ordo in Latin, right? And why, like, that's good enough, isn't it? Like, no, it's not just the language, right? It's the prayers. It's like you look at what you're looking at the mass as you're praying along with the priest during the liturgy at a Latin mass, and you're like, dude, and not dude, I don't want to call the Pope dude, but like, Holy Father, it's so much more. It's so much more than that. But one thing I really appreciate about Pope Leo is that I think he takes liturgy very seriously, like extremely seriously. Like I was looking at some of the like the midnight mass and the daybreak mass for Christmas. I think he celebrated those really, really, really nicely. Right. I think that he has an extreme reverence for the mass to celebrate it reverently. Um, and I really appreciate that from him. And I think that coming in 2026, maybe we'll see some more, maybe some buckling down on some liturgical norms, right? On how to celebrate the mass. But I don't think we'll see anything crazy coming out of Rome, if I'm being honest with you, right? I don't think we'll see anything that that significant from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think right now we're kind of like in a period of the status quo. So I mean, just to go a little bit broader, we're talking about liturgy is how we give God what God is due, and that's kind of the basis of any culture. Like if you can't
Yep.
really have, properly speaking, a culture without liturgy, and the experiment that the West has been trying to do, and I mean even just politically, not even to get into what's happened in the Catholic Church in the '60s, is to have a culture without liturgy, to have a culture
Mhm.
without God, where we're not going to give God public worship. We're just going to try and be secular good people. Like that's kind of the experiment we're living in, and that we're seeing is failing. So liturgy is absolutely essential to culture. And I'm sure you've got a lot of great points to get into that from Joseph Pieper's book, Leisure is the Basis of Culture. But let me just give some quick shots right here where it's like, okay, so liturgy is supposed to be the foundation of our culture, but in the Catholic Church in the West, we have a lot of debate as to what our liturgy should look like. So there's the Novus Ordo, which is just Latin for the new order, which is the change of the way that the Mass, the liturgy was celebrated, that came out after the Second Vatican Council. And then there's the Latin Mass, the way that the Mass was roughly done from the medieval period until the 1960s. And
I
there's
would even
kind of
say
this
before the medieval period, right? Like since like the time
well,
of like antiquity in a sense.
yeah, like a major chunks of it go back to like antiquity, like the canon, and
Exactly.
many
Yeah.
many many major parts of it go back to the canon. There's a really good book by Father Adrian Fortescue on the matter. That a lot of it goes back to antiquity, but good chunks of it are from like the time of Gregory and so on and so forth. But it's a thousands. Essentially, the Latin Mass is thousands of year old in many of its parts, and there's this kind of debate that's happening in American Catholic culture, not even just American Catholic culture, but kind of just Catholic culture at large, as to whether or not it was prudent or right and good to get rid of a lot of these strengths and these ancestral traditions we had in our liturgy in exchange for what we have now in the Novus Ordo. And in my opinion, they both have two different ways of looking at what we render to God, and they're both about rendering worship and sacrifice to God, particularly in the Holy Eucharist. Right, the Holy Eucharist is categorically the greatest sacrifice that you could give to God. So liturgy is always about worshiping God. How do you worship God? You worship God through sacrifice. Sacrifice is the giving up, in many cases, the destruction of something out of love for the higher good. In this case, God. Right. So we are offering the Eucharist as a sacrifice to God is really important, and this is what unifies all of Catholic liturgy, is the fact that the liturgy is a sacrifice of the Eucharist. And because we're Catholics, we believe that the Eucharist is the body, the blood, the soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. The Eucharist is Jesus Christ, not merely just a symbol of bread and wine. So that's what unifies Catholic liturgy across the globe, whether you're, in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, or you're, celebrating a mass or a divine liturgy secretly in Saudi Arabia. No matter where you are, that fact that Jesus Christ is being sacrificed in the Eucharist is the cornerstone of all Catholic civilization and of the Catholic liturgy. Now, specifically, we have these debates in the West as to how we ought to publicly worship God. And I think the strength, this is how I see it, the strength of the Latin Mass is that it's more oriented towards mental prayer and meditation,
Mhm.
while the
Absolutely.
strength of the the Novus Ordo is that it's focused on a lot of vocal prayer and ensuring that everybody there is having an active understanding, right? Because I think a lot of the fathers at the Second Vatican Council, the reason why they changed from the Latin Mass to the Novus Ordo, which is celebrated in whatever language you're in. So here in the United States, it's in English and Spanish, basically, depending what time you go to Mass. In France, it's French, etc. But the Latin Mass was always in Latin. So I think one of the main pushes of the Second Vatican Council was to make sure that everybody at Mass is able to understand what's going on, and they're able to respond actively, like with vocal prayers, which is good. Vocal prayer is a good, legitimate thing you should do. But the Latin Mass has a lot of silence. If you've never been, I remember the first.
Go.
Well, I've never been go, but I remember I went with a different roommate than in college, or in college, not Connor, to the Latin Mass. Who went, and it was so quiet because it was a low Mass. Like it's such, there's so much silence, and he was like, oh my gosh, was there like no microphone or anything? Like, we were like confused as to how quiet it is in comparison to Novus Ordo. And the Latin Mass is really about being quiet, and kind of what people like do in Eucharistic adoration, where they're just meditating on the mysteries of God, and through this higher level of meditation, achieving a deeper intimacy. So I think those two different liturgical forms that we have in the West are focused on two different kinds of prayer. And that's kind of where a lot of the debate, I think, comes into play. Like, I'm curious. I don't know, because we had a lot of people, by a lot, like 300 people view our last episode. I'm curious as to how many people who are watch would even know what the Latin Mass looks like. Like, how would
Yeah,
we even
yeah.
go? You know?
I mean, just to give like a little, just so people know, right? So when Andrew said low mass, so there's three kind of like levels to the Latin mass, right? There's a low mass where the priest said there's no chanting, there's no hymns. There might be like a communion hymn, right? Like the parish that Kate and I go to, my wife, go to for Latin mass here in SoCal. We go, and sometimes like during like Holy Communion, they might do like a some sort of chant or polyphony or hymn, mainly just chant and polyphony, um, and then right, but it's very quiet. It's extremely quiet, and that's kind of like what you'll find for your daily traditional Latin Mass, Tridentine Mass. For a high mass, there's chants throughout the entire mass, and it's just the priest, right? And two altar boys. Same with the low mass, just a priest and two altar boys. And then with a high mass, a solemn high mass, that's the third level. Um, there is a priest, a deacon, which a lot of those who go to the Novus Ordo are used to. But there's also a subdeacon, and he has a very particular role. But I'm not going to get into that now. And uh it's that you're in a place that's sacred. You know that this is a sacred thing, and not that a lot of parishes do the Novus Ordo, unsacred. That's not even a proper word, but there can be a lot of problems with the Novus Ordo sometimes. And that's the whole thing, and I think people have spoken enough on that. But essentially, sometimes there's the way mass is celebrated is not up to par with the reverence that the Latin mass is celebrated. But I also think that there is ways to do it well, right? And that might not, as I said, like Pope Leo. I think Pope Leo celebrates mass extremely reverently, right? I like to peek sometimes at what he's doing, and I think that he does that really, really well. I think the Christmas liturgies were perfect examples of this. Um, And when it comes to the Second Vatican Council too, the Novus Ordo isn't even, in my opinion, right, isn't even the Mass of the Second Vatican Council. There was what they call an interim Mass that was kind of popularized from like late 1964, 65 to like 1969, where it was a kind of like a hybrid between the Novus Ordo Mass that we're all used to and the Latin Mass that was that was the only use in the Western Church before the Council. And Sacrosanctum Concilium, I know that talks about Latin has pride of place in the liturgy, right? But and like I like there was good intentions there, right? Like the readings are, they were looking for like the readings to be done in English and stuff like that, or the vernacular, right? The common language of the area. I don't necessarily think that's actually a bad thing, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that actually kind of makes some sense. But at the same time, if you have a Latin Mass Missal, like this one, this is the Father Lassance Missal, right? Um, like for reference, right? Like you go to the Novus Ordo and you have the readings. They always have like little booklets in the pew right in front of you as you're sitting. This is essentially like your own personal booklet, and it has all your readings for the year, the liturgical year in there. Um, and I love the Follow Sans Missile. I think it does a great job. Um, but anyways, that's something that I think is actually extremely important is the quietness of the prayer, because you like in the Novus Ordo, like you have the ability, if you can find it in the Novus Ordo missalettes, to follow along with the prayers of the priest. There is that in the common Novus Ordo missals in your church, but the most people don't do that, right? Because they could just hear it and they know what's going on. But I think that there's been a lack of proper catechesis, and that kind of goes back to culture, right? If I'm being completely honest, right? Because in talking, I remember having a conversation with an evangelical Protestant, and he was like, well, it all seems very ritualistic, you know what I mean? People just kind of stand up, sit down, kneel, stand up, sit down, kneel, whatever it is. And well, yeah, of course it's ritualistic. That goes back to the Old Testament. That's the Old Testament for you. Um, and the liturgy there, they had they had a sense of liturgy, right? They had liturgy that was the basis of their entire culture, right?
It was
And
incredibly complicated too. It was
it was
incredibly complicated.
incredibly, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so we should
that
talk a little bit about I think Old
the Old
Testament liturgy.
Testament,
Then I think
yeah,
we should
I
jump
that
into
yeah,
yeah, then we'll
yeah,
jump into like liturgy as basis of culture. I think we should get into
yeah,
that. But so this is another important part about liturgy. It's okay, it's the public worship of God, but it's also governing how you're connected to heaven as well, right?
yep,
So
yeah,
in the Old Testament liturgy, it was kind of a bit like this sounds crude, but I don't mean it to sound crude. It's kind of like when you got little kids and you have them you give them like the fake little cooking things. They got like a fake little stove and a fake little microwave, or it's like they're like playing along to kind of like imitate something, like imitating what their parents are doing. So the Old Testament liturgy was about imitating what the angels were doing with God in heaven, right? It's like we're gonna do our part to imitate, and it's incredibly complicated. And there are all of these great stories about how these people weren't being reverent in the liturgy, and they all like a whole bunch of people just die, right? Because like they're interacting with God the wrong way. And it's another thing because liturgy in the Old Testament had an immense reverence, right? Like it because they are treating the presence of God like the way you would treat like uranium, because they're like, oh my gosh, like God is great and God loves us, but God is categorically different from anything we encounter here. And if we don't interact with this being, well, he's not a being, he's being itself. If we don't interact with this God properly, we're like going to interact with power itself the wrong way, and we're going to treat God the wrong way. Then people just die because God's immensely powerful. So God in the Old Testament liturgy, you see a lot of the sacredness where it's like, I am not in a normal place. It's like I'm entering a place where these like, how like I guess it depends if you live near a power plant or whatever, but it's like, like you see all of these signs and you see everyone's dressed in a specific way. And it's like, okay, we can't be acting in this building like we would normally because there's this radioactive substance here. Well, in the Old Testament liturgy, and in many senses, this is preserved by I think, the Latin Mass in a really unique way. Like when you go in here, you are not like anywhere else. You are entering into heaven. And that's kind of where
The Holy of
uh,
Holies.
the Holy of Holies, right? So in the Old Testament, the Holy of Holies was a place that was so sacred in the Old Testament liturgy that only the high priest could go once a year. I mean, like if unworthy people in the Old Testament like walked into somewhere they weren't supposed to be, they would just die, right? And I mean, like it's kind of a horrifying thought, but I mean, it's like a holy fear, like a holy honor of God. And in the New Testament liturgy is even greater than the Old Testament liturgy because, like I said, the Old Testament liturgy where they worship God, it was kind of like they were young children imitating the angels, where it's like, okay, we're going to be like, we're going to still legitimately worshiping God, but we're imitating what's happening in heaven. Heaven is up here, we're down here, and we're like imitating it down here. But in the New Testament liturgy, we have the Eucharist, which is the game changer of how worshiping God works, right? And that's why Catholicism is different, because even in Protestantism, right? Like they read the Bible and they're praying, they're saying prayers to God, but they're still down here, like in the Old Testament, looking up to God. Whereas in the liturgy in the Catholic Church, since the Eucharist is our Lord Jesus Christ, his body, blood, soul, and divinity, there is now a connection between heaven and earth, right? So liturgy is fundamentally worshiping God and giving him what he deserves. Now, who loves God the Father more than anyone? God the Son. God the Son offers perfect, infinite love to God the Father. So, what is a more perfect way for us to worship? To unite our finite worship to the worship of God the Son in the Eucharist. So, this is why Catholic liturgy is different, because it's a literal connection between heaven and earth. Like a church isn't just like a building that you build to like house your Bible, right? It's not like where you meet for a Bible study. A church is literally the place on earth that heaven connects to, that God actually dwells in the tabernacle. And the tabernacle is that gold box in the church. When Jesus Christ in the Eucharist is present in that tabernacle, in that box, you can literally say God is in there. God, and that's a huge deal. That's like being it's like if we were in like in your place in San Diego, it's like if we were like, oh, like the president's like down the road. It's like, well, the president's down the road. Or, if there's somebody like big or important that you respect, it's like God himself, the creator of the universe, lives down the street in like this
Yeah.
building. And that's where heaven and earth touch. And that's why liturgy is important for any culture, because God is the vine and we are the branches. If we as a culture, or even as individuals, even as families, are going to survive and be nourished, it's going to come by union with the God who is still on earth in the Eucharist, right?
Yeah, and that's something I think a lot of Catholics have lost, right? Like the Eucharist is not a prize for just showing up, right? That's like a
Mm-hmm.
common thing I've heard. And I
Mm-hmm.
just read it recently. The Eucharist is not a prize for, like no, dude. Like this is God, right? This is the incarnate God. He is still here with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this actually goes back to the Old Testament, right? So God is going to use the same formulas that he used in the Old Testament, but bring them to another level in the new
Mm-hmm.
covenant, right? Because testament and
Mm-hmm.
covenant mean the same exact thing. Testament is just from the Latin translation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Testamentum, covenants, diatheke.
Mm-hmm.
In Greek, covenant, that's what it means. And then what's it in Hebrew? Berith?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, right. So take this for instance, right? There was the oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the offering of the bread and wine in the Old Testament.
The
Um
Todah.
the Todah, yes. So right, you had the Todah, and that was an offering of the bread and wine, and you also had the Passover, right, which was the slaying of a lamb, like the lamb had no broken bones, the lamb was perfect, it was unblemished, right, and that's what the Eucharist is, right, because Jesus Christ is the unblemished Lamb. He is the Lamb of God. John the Baptist talks about this, um, and behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, right? And he is the unblemished lamb. And through an offering of bread and wine, which is prefigured in the Old Testament, right? God is using the same formulas, but in a new, would it be fair to say, transfigured way, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Jesus Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
The new and everlasting eternal covenant, right? So that's where the Eucharist comes from, right? And that has to be the center of a society. We talked about this last time, where where every society had a cultural, a religious, philosophical idea, right, that drove them. Our
Hmm.
society really doesn't anymore because we live in this very like post-liberal, modernist era, right? That's kind of just spiritually dead, right?
Yes,
Um,
yeah. I mean, like liturgy was about being alive, and the fact that we
yes,
don't care about liturgy shows that we're already dead. I mean, like
yes,
because
we are.
old like the pagans, even the pagans had liturgy, and they had liturgy because they were like, okay, there are these supernatural beings that are above us, or I guess preternatural would be a better word, and like there are these spirits, and we have to like work with them, or they're going to kill us. And like
Yeah,
that was their thought. That was their thought. And obviously these thoughts are these spirits are either made up or they're demons, probably a mixture of both. Where you
yeah,
have these pagan cultures saying, okay, we want to live, so we have to figure out how we live with things that are above us, that govern things like angels and demons. Well, probably demons. So I mean, even those guys had that figured out, right? So it's like to have a culture, to have a life, a community of life. Even the pagans figured out you have to figure out how to do liturgy, right?
yeah,
And we are not worshiping demons like the pagans, nor are we living in shadows and figures of things to come like the Jews were in the Old Testament. But we're living in what God designed humanity for, which was to worship Him, have a direct relationship with Him, and have His presence be our source of life. So if a culture is to even live, it has to have its relationship to the divine, because the divine is life itself. So if the fact
yeah.
that again, I've said it a lot, but I'm saying it again, the fact that our culture has denied giving God a public liturgy is a sign that our culture is dead.
Yeah, and this goes back even to the sense that like this is the promise, this is Abraham's promise fulfilled, right?
Hmm.
The fact that like we are the people, right? That God, we are the descendants of Abraham that God, typologically and prophetically gave to, promised him, right? Like with the binding of Isaac, right? Where Isaac is led up the hill of Mount Moriah, led up Mount Moriah. He carried the cross. He and he carried the wood of his own sacrifice. Now, obviously, Abraham didn't, and he was the only begotten son of Abraham, right?
Hmm.
And so, prophetically and typologically, we see that we are the promised people, right, in the church, right? And that's where as I said last time, right, as it says in the Second Vatican Council, and also in um the new catechism from 1992, right? But this has been this has just been self-evident to Catholic Christianity for the
Yeah.
last 2,000 years, not just from the Second Vatican Council on, right?
Hmm.
Is that the Eucharist is a source and sum of the Christian life, and you can only
Hmm.
find that in the it's in the Catholic Church, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. And you made a
and
really good point there that I want to touch on. So, like the Connor was describing is Genesis 22, where Abraham is told by God, "Offer your only begotten son Isaac to me." And Abraham has faith in God and is like, "Okay, I will." So they go up to Mount Moriah. Abraham's going to sacrifice Isaac, his son, up on the hill, and then an angel stops and he's like, "Hey, you passed the test. You don't really have to sacrifice him." And God says, "Because of what you've done here, all of the nations of the world will be blessed by your seed, by your descendants." And so, how are the nations going to be blessed? Through Christ and His church and through the Most Holy Eucharist. You have all these places in the Old Testament where it talks about how God is going to bless these other nations, because right, the Old Testament's basically most of it's about Israel, right? I mean, you
yeah,
see these other guys, you see the other nations interact, but they're often like in a negative light because like they're
yeah,
Egyptians or like Babylonians. It's like they're like often the villains. So it's like, but God's giving these promises, like, okay, but like I'm going to bless all of the nations, not just Israel. Old Testament's about Israel being the firstborn, nation of God. Basically, I'm going to bless everyone else too. And the way He does it is through the church and through the Eucharist by expanding liturgy to these other nations. So if we as Americans want to be one of these nations that God says He's going to bless, we have to do it through the blessings, like through the way He gave, which is going to be through Christ and through the liturgy in that manner.
yeah. So now I kind of want to move into like the modern aspect of it, right? Just kind of give some people some grounding as to how we could see this in recent history, right? Because I think this is extremely important. So there's this book by this guy named Joseph Pieper called Leisure is the Basis of
Leisure is
Culture.
the basis of
The
culture.
Basis
Yeah.
of Culture. Yeah, great book. And so you could ask Andrew, like, listen, man, that
It was the one book Connor read in college.
No, I read bits of other books, just bits. Andrew witnessed me read this though, so he believes me.
That was the one book I saw him read.
So I mean, it's only like 100 pages. So
It's a great. Yeah, everybody who's watching it should get a copy.
Should read it. It's not hard to grasp. So I want to kind of cover some of the main ideas. So like we live in a very workaday world, right? Right? Like you go to work, you come home, you have dinner, you watch, whatever TV show. If you're Catholic, maybe you say a rosary or do some sort of night prayers or whatever it is, and then you kiss your wife and you go to bed. And then you get up and do the same thing all over again, right? So, in the words of, I don't want to get copyrighted, but in the words of a very famous squid that's blue from a very famous children's show,
we're not going to get copyright struck for that, man.
Oh, okay. In the words of Squidward Tentacles, I cook the food, I order the food, you cook the food. We do this for 40 years and then we die. That's like one of my favorite parts of that show. Anyways, so essentially we live in this very workaday world, right? And this springs out of the Industrial Revolution. It springs out of a very liberal, like politically liberal mindset. And like we're not just talking about like Democrats here, right? Because like even so-called modern day conservatives, a lot of them are liberals by definition, right? What I mean by that is that it's very individualistic. It's all about, it's about you, right? How much money you can make, how much personal success you have, right? Like and that's kind of ruined society and culture as a whole, right? And this kind of springs out of the 1700s, the 1800s, and 1900s. But the thing I really want to grasp at is that so a lot of us just go to work every day, and you don't have a sort of that's why like a lot of priests, right, you see on YouTube here or just in the homilies will talk about you should have a schedule of life, right? Like kind of like the monastics, right? Monks, they have a schedule of prayer in their life. Andrew and I were both pretty heavily involved with the Opus Dei at Franciscan, and the Opus Dei was founded by Saint Jose Maria Escriva in Spain, almost 98 years ago now, and it was founded in 1928. And that was about finding God in your ordinary everyday life, right? And kind of having the schedule of prayer. Did you pray your rosary? Did you do like 15 minutes of New Testament studies? Did you go to Mass that day? Did you go make a visit to the Blessed Sacrament, the Eucharist? And so just kind of making a schedule of life for yourself. And that's a major, major problem that we have in this modern world, because the thing is that especially in the United States, because I mean, yes, it's a Christian country, but majority for a long time there, it was majority Protestant, right? And it's good to assimilate to cultures, right? But a lot of the Catholics, especially post 1965, started to kind of lose that cultural aspect, right? I mean, there's some Irish and Italians and Mexicans and Polish that have kind of held on to that, but for the most part, we just kind of live in this conglomerated, this post 1960s culture. There's an In-N-Out and McDonald's on every street corner. And
I wish there was an In-N-Out. I wish there was an In-N-Out on every street corner, but there's not.
I wish
it's only
there was
California.
Yeah. And like Tennessee for some reason, apparently.
That's weird. Really?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I'd have to look this up. But I feel like there is. Anyways, besides the point, dude. Forget about In-N-Out. All I care about, I'm from New England. I care about Dunkin' Donuts. So, Starbucks is, I can't stand Starbucks.
I'm not a fan of Starbucks either.
Dunks is so superior.
I have to agree with you that Dunkin' Donuts is better than Starbucks. Now, even though that's an East Coast thing, I have to submit to that. It is better.
Hey, one of the original 13 is talking. Be quiet and listen. Anyways,
what were we talking about?
We're talking about how we live in this workaday world, and we don't have leisure. But what is leisure, right? Now, it's good to sit back and relax and like watch your favorite like TV show. Like hopefully it's not like blaspheming God and it's just like gratuitous, horrible, evil scenes all the time, like at all, honestly. And if they are, just skip through them. Um, but essentially, what I'm getting at is that the rest we have, the weekend that we have, right, is just enough to get us back to work on Monday, right? Oh, like for 2 days, I'm gonna sit back and but even those days aren't overly like restful, like leisurely, right? Those days aren't restful and leisurely because and like 6 days you labor, the seventh day you rest. That's
Mhm.
biblical, but at the same time too, is it like okay, like what are you doing to like actually have leisure? So leisure has to, excuse me, leisure has to do with the true, good, and beautiful. And so voice crack again, dude. Anyways, I'm a grown man. I'm a father.
Yeah. You're
Like,
a
come
grown
on, dude.
man with a
I
wife
have a
and children.
receding hairline. I
Works at 9 to 5, wife and children, receding hairline, but he still has a voice crack.
so, but and so leisure is reading a good book, right? Like reading a book like leisure is the basis of culture because you're pursuing truth and beauty, right? It's going to an art museum. It's going to mass, right? Mass is true leisure. And I want to kind of point out that I like the example of Pope Benedict, for instance, because I think he brought this back to limelight because he had a very like Disney Channel esque, like old timey Disney Channel cartoon from like the 50s, like childhood in Bavaria, right? Like
Yeah.
everything was just surrounded it was just surrounded by the Catholic faith.
Hmm.
Bavaria in Germany, it was surrounded by the Catholic faith. And obviously, like he went through World War II, so it's not like it was all like
Yeah, it's like
sunshine and
he lived a
rainbows.
cartoon. It's like, man, that guy lived in Nazi Germany. You know?
No, I know.
But I
What
get
I
what
mean
you
is,
mean.
is
Yeah.
that the faith life was
Yeah.
just that very beautiful aspect of life and culture that really shaped his entire life. Um, and I think that is so beautiful because, like, okay, I'm gonna go back to this image for a second. Andrew knows
There
exactly
we
what
go.
image I'm pulling up right now, but this image, right? Processions, right? Eucharistic processions. There's rogation days. There's ember days, right? And I'll have Andrew explain what those are because he'll do, as I said, he always does a better job explaining what things are than I do, and he can attest to this. But um, that's something that has been lost in the last 60, 70 years, and was, I'm not sure if it ever actually took place in the United States, but truly, right? But as I said, you still have like some of those still cultural festivals that are inherently Catholic, right? Especially if you go to a traditional parish, like the parish that Kate and I go to for Latin Mass is is so rich with a cultural heritage. Um and that's something with like a devotion to a certain saint, right? You find that in a lot of traditional parishes, right? Like Andrew sent me a video, our friends and I, a video from the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe up where he
Hmm.
lives, and that's just beautiful. I mean, that was just a
It
beautiful
was
event.
wild, man. It was wild. It was awesome. It was awesome, man. There was like there's like processions. Let me just jump in here now at this point, where it's
Good,
like
jump in, dude, jump in.
like leisure. So like leisure, like put in like a more succinct sense, is like it's an activity that you do like rebuild your soul, right? Because like
Yes.
you have to be productive. Like society exists because like a bunch of guys got together and like, let's not starve to death, and like let's make sure our wives don't die. So like you have to work, you have to like do things, but you can't just do that all the time. You have to like relax and have your soul and your body rest so that way it can be recreated. So leisure isn't just like, oh, I'm sitting down and I'm just eating Cheetos or whatever, because that doesn't really properly build you back up, you know. Like maybe you can rest a little, but you're not
It
being built
Yeah,
back up.
and
So
it's just
what
pleasure.
it's just pleasure, right? So it's not recreating you, reinvigorating you, giving you that spirit and that passion that you need to go forward. That object with which you're willing to give your life and the sacrifice for is like what leisure is, where it kind of like hypes you up to like go do what you've got to go do. So like what we did for Feast Day of Our Lady of Guadalupe is you have all these huge like processions, you got lines of cars, he like dressed up all the kids as like Juan Diego or like Lady Guadalupe. There's like so many pictures of me like when I was like Juan Diego, I was like a little boy. You have like all of these, you have all these things. There's a ton of music everywhere. It's just like such a fun time. We're like the whole community is getting together, and we're like, let's celebrate, like let's have music, let's dance, let's eat food, let's drink. Obviously, let's go to mass. That's the most important part. But let's focus on what this is all about. Like what it's kind of like in The Office where Creed Bratton, there's just one character where he's like, if they find out like I like can't see, then that means I can't scuba. And if I can't scuba, what's this all been about? What have I been working towards my entire life then? It's like, it's like something like so minor, but it's like culturally, it's like what are we working towards and what's it all about? It's not just about not dying, but it's about something greater than ourselves. And our culture really doesn't have like anything greater than ourselves to like aspire to anymore.
Exactly.
And like that's because we've abandoned like a liturgy. So like liturgy is like a form of leisure because it rebuilds the soul, and it's the basis of culture.
It's the primary leisure, honestly.
It's the greatest leisure because nothing rebuilds the soul quite like it. So because of that, it like builds a culture because it tells you who you are. It tells you what you're fighting for, and if you don't know who you are and you don't know what you're fighting for, you don't have a culture. You have a bunch of kind of like what Connor was getting into, a bunch of just different individuals who have like different goals. And it's like my goal is to make money and then like die in 5 years or 50 years or whatever, like whatever American like, kind of like post-war like individualistic nonsense.
Put
so
my
liturgy's
kids
supposed
into
to
an
be
Ivy League school or something like that, and have a ginormous house and a great 401k.
Yeah, I mean it's good to have things, but
and
it's like
good.
It's not
that's
transcendent. And going back to like old New Testament liturgy, because New Testament liturgy goes up to heaven, and all of these goals that people have, they're good things. Like I mean, like we went to college, we have jobs and whatnot, but it's like that's not the ultimate transcendent. That's not going beyond our world right here and connecting to the highest good. So we know what we're doing everything for, which is return to God, right?
Absolutely. And that's something actually that in chapter 5 of the book Pieper closes out with, right? Because this is our interaction with the incarnation. And I might be butchering this a little bit, and I probably am, as I usually do. But this is our interaction with the incarnation, and this is actually really fitting that we talk about this right after the nativity of our Lord in Christmas, right? Christ's Mass, right? That this is our interaction with the incarnation, right? This is our interaction with the sacrifice on Calvary, with his life, death, and resurrection, right? We get the entirety of the economy of salvation every Sunday, right? When you go to Mass. And so when it comes to that, right, it's important, as Andrew said, it's important to make sure you have your bank account's not like floundering, you're not in the negatives, and it's important to make sure that like my wife has her little pregnancy pillow that's like the worst thing in the world, and so but like stuff like that, right? It's important to have material things. The material world's important. We're not Gnostics, we're not all these silly little guys from the multiple heresies that hated the body for some reason.
That could be a whole episode about
that's going to be a whole episode,
body and soul.
Exactly. But that's the thing, and like you shouldn't work just for the sake of working. Like the medievals would have said that was bad, right? That was like a form of sloth, and it could even be like a form of achadia, the vice of achadia, which is essentially like not doing what you're supposed to do in the moment, right? And when it comes to liturgy, I actually let me just pull up a quote. I got the book. Quote, this is a quote from Joseph Pieper. Celebration of God and worship cannot be done unless it is done for its own sake. That most sublime form of affirmation of the world as a whole is the fountainhead of leisure, right? So like we don't worship God so that like I can have my bank account replenished, right? Like we're not like prosperity gospel people. I don't
It's pagan.
It's pagan. It's totally pagan. Like I don't render God his dues so that I can get what I want. And like we're all guilty of that to a certain extent. Like, oh God, like I'll pray a rosary, like please just like let this thing happen for me. You know what I mean? I'm praying to you so this thing can happen. And as I said, that's not a bad thing. Like you could do that. You could be like, God, I'm praying to you and I'm offering up these prayers so this can happen. Right. But like that shouldn't be the primary focus of our veneration of and worship of God. Right. it should be the fact that we do it for its own sake, because worship of God is rendered, it is due to him, right? We go to mass on Sundays. Yeah, I do it so I don't go to hell. You know what I mean? Like that's like the very that's like the iceberg. You know what I mean? Like, see like the
Yeah.
tip of the iceberg. It's like, yeah, okay, the tip of the iceberg is I don't do it, so I do it so I don't go to hell. But like the whole giant part of the iceberg underneath the water is because no, it's because I do it for its own sake, because I love God and I want to render him what is due to him.
Hmm.
So that's something that our culture has lost, right? And that gets into like the liturgical calendar, right? Why the liturgical calendar is so important, because like, right, like say your parish is named after Saint Peter, right? Well, on St. Peter's feast day, you guys want to have a huge celebration. You know what I mean? Break
Hmm.
out the 12-year-old bottle of whiskey, break out the Macallan 15.
Yeah.
The you know what I mean? Have a giant feast together. Get to know your fellow parishioners. Hang out with
Hmm.
your priest, buy him a cigar, smoke it with them. You know what I mean? After Holy Mass, right?
Hmm.
And this gets back to communion, right? Because you just received the God of the universe under the guise of a tiny white piece of bread, right? But it's just truly his body, blood, soul, and divinity. And now you're communed with him. You're part of him. You're having this theosis with him, right? Which means essentially, like from last episode, if you're tuning in new, is that you're becoming a part of God, right?
Well, becoming like God.
Becoming like God. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a better way to put. Yeah. And so, right, you are having this communion with him, but you're not only communing with him, you're communing with the entire body of Christ, right?
Hmm.
And that's why liturgy is so central and important, right? Like take the Corpus Christi processions, right? At my home parish where I got baptized, married, all my sacraments leading up to marriage, including marriage, matrimony, right? They started doing Corpus Christi processions from my parish to the little Polish parish, which was like 2 blocks away, right? And that was just such a lovely experience, because here's Catholics on this great feast day, right? And like there's different nationalities. The parish I went to, like it was once heavily Irish Italian, now it's also heavily Mexican and Hispanic, because the priest is from Colombia, and I don't know what other Hispanics are there, and I don't want to. I know you guys like to remain,
You don't want
you
to.
know.
You don't want to start like an inner Hispanic like racial
Yeah,
feud
yeah, exactly.
between the
Uh,
Mexicans, the Puerto Ricans, the Colombians, the Venezuelans.
yeah, I
But
don't.
that's the thing
Yeah,
about liturgy, though,
yeah.
is that liturgy is the only way you can unite disparate tribes.
Exactly,
But that's the
exactly. And
only
you
way
could
you can do it.
still respect those cultural differences. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna go into the Polish parish and be like, "You can't venerate John Paul II." You know what I mean? Like, or
Yeah.
Saint Faustina Kowalska, and then like they're
Hmm.
not gonna walk into the Mexican Irish Italian parish and be like, Saint Padre Pio, and Our Lady of Guadalupe are out. Like, no, like that's
Yeah.
not gonna happen. Like, no, like it's just like, oh man, that's such a beautiful cultural devotion from
Hmm.
the Polish and the Hispanics. Like that's awesome that we could witness that. And I think honestly the United States is such a fertile ground for that for American Catholics, because there's so many different type of ethnic groups here that yes, while we subscribe to a certain kind of like widened Anglo culture over the United States when it comes to our government and laws and all that stuff, right? We have the means to make a rich Catholic culture here, because there's so many different type of rich Catholic cultures, right?
Hmm.
Like, with the Mexicans, with the Polish, with the Irish, with the Italians, right? And like take like Spain for instance, right? With um like everybody who goes to like all the Americans who go to Spain, they go to like Madrid or Seville or whatever it is, and they see the guys in the really pointy hats, right? Who do
Yeah.
it's like for penitential.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my gosh, like what is the KKK doing here? It's like,
Yeah.
that is not the KKK. Those are guys who are wearing that as penance,
Yeah.
right?
The
Because
Spanish had it first. Like
is the
they
Spanish
had
had it
like
first.
this
The
like
Spanish had the
pointy
pointy
like this
hats
pointy
first.
hat. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a beautiful cultural aspect. And that's what Catholicism brings about. You can't have a good culture without Catholicism, right? Truly, in my opinion, right? You can't have a good culture. You can't have a good culture that's not centered around the liturgy, right? And getting
Hmm.
back to like what Pope Benedict is talking about, or would reference to in his beautiful childhood with Bavarian liturgical customs, right? Right? Like with all the processions. If you go to like Bavaria and like Austria, like you see on the side of the road just like little tiny like boxes with crucifixes. Oh shoot, it's on my microphone. with crucifixes in them. Like you have like your little box, and it's like little, and it's like kind of like this, and like on the side of the road, and like little crucifixes in them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what leisure is all about, right? It's the liturgy is a supreme form of leisure, and it renews you, right? Because Jesus Christ is not supposed to be about, like, as I said, like just getting something from him. No, it's giving something to him, and he'll give you infinitely more back, right? Like you offer
Mm-hmm.
up your little tiny sufferings of like, oh man, I just stubbed my toe, or like, man, like we're out of ranch. Like, you know what I mean? You offer that up to him, or like you offer that up to him in like some beautiful way, like, Lord, like I don't like this, but I offer this up to you for the conversion of sinners or whatnot, right? He'll give you infinitely something back, right? And so that is what we need to do as a culture when it comes to liturgy and leisure, right? So like that's
Mm-hmm.
why like rest on the Sabbath is so important, because right, like you go to mass, you can go out to the restaurant afterwards, you go home, cook brunch or whatever it is, right? And then you go read a good book, you watch some football, and maybe you pray the rosary. And there was a time in this in the Catholic world where you not only would go to mass on Sundays, but then you would also go to Sunday vespers, right? Part of the liturgy of
Mm-hmm.
the hours, right? Because you're going and praying the official prayer of the church, you know, in community, right? And I think that's also a beautiful thing that's been lost. Um, and that is true leisure, right? It's renewing yourself. Um, and so yeah, you have to work. You have to go through this whole workaday world, but at the same time too, 6 days you labor, 7 day on the seventh day you rest,
Mm-hmm.
and um that's something I think that's been lost. And I think in order to restore Christ the King and to bring about the social reign of Christ the King, right? You have to bring about that true leisure again, which is centered on the liturgy, about reinvigorating your parish, about like, hey, like like as I said, like the Latin Mass parish Kate and I go to is so vibrant, right? Like they have men's group, they have women's group. Like I remember like last Saturday, right? Kate and I were going. I was gonna go to confession, and they were having like uh I don't even know what it was for. It was a Hispanic thing. It was like posada. I don't even know what
Oh,
that
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. Posada.
Okay,
Yeah,
I know
another one
you
of
know
our.
what it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what that is. I know what. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what that is, but
It's like a reenactment of like when Joseph and Mary are trying to find like an inn in Bethlehem.
oh, that's
Yeah,
lovely. But they were doing a
yeah,
procession afterwards. But
yeah,
that's what
yeah.
I'm
And then they
talking
did.
about.
That's what we
That's
would do. We grew up doing that. We would like process in like the neighborhood. Like it wasn't even at church. Like we would process like in the
Oh
neighborhood
yeah, they were
to
processing
different
outside of the
houses.
church. Oh,
Yeah.
that's lovely. See, like, but that's the thing though. That shows that leisure is the basis of culture, because you're renewing yourself in
Mm-hmm.
something that's eternally life-giving, right? And that's just the thing. Like, it's the new and everlasting covenant. You are renewed, right? That's why living a sacramental life is so important. That's why these liturgical customs that have unfortunately have been lost, they were all for renewal, right? Like, I don't know if you want to get quickly into like Ember and Rogation days, but I think that that's something that might help kind of drive the point home.
Sure. I mean, so like Ember and Rogation days were specific days in the calendar where everybody would do like these public fasting and different processions in order offering them up as to God as something that we will offer these things up to God because of our love for us and in a specific way for vocations to the priesthood and things like that. So I mean that's something that was an old liturgical tradition in the church that unfortunately has been lost. And it's like, well, liturgy is the key to everything because it's the key to heaven. It's how we participate in heaven. It's how
Yeah,
we get life. So it's how our culture is going to have life. So that's why there's often these heated discussions in the church about what we should do about the liturgy because it really matters because it's the key to how our culture is going to get formed and connected to heaven. It's like
yeah,
liturgy is immensely important, right?
yeah. And I think that like as you see these debates with like the Amazonian, right? You know what I mean?
Is that even real?
And
Like I don't even
I don't know if it's real,
I don't even
dude.
know.
Like I just
I
remember
don't even
like
know if
seeing
that's real. I
I
don't
just
think
remember
anybody who's
people
watching
talking
this even
about it
know.
like back in like 2018 or something. And
Yeah.
like And that's just the thing though, right? Like you don't need like these like as I said, like you have like different cultural rights. This is also something I wanted to get into as well. Um, right. Like there was before Pope Saint Pius V kind of consolidated the liturgy in 1570, right, with the Tridentine Mass. The Latin Mass is like the common liturgy of the Western Church, right? There was many local liturgical rites, right? So like in England you had the use of Sarum, which came out of Salisbury. In still to this day in Spain you have uh the Mozambique, the
Mozarabic.
Mozarabic. Yeah, thank you. The Mozarabic, right? I know Arabic was somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
it's a whole thing.
yeah.
But I
And
think we shouldn't get too much into the specifics because that could be
no, I
its
know.
own episode. But
Yeah, yeah. But the point I'm trying to drive home is that like liturgy is the basis of culture. Leisure, which is liturgy, is a basis of culture, and it's the ultimate renewal. And I think that we have to live these vibrant parish lives, right? And that also translates into the home, right? Right. So like it's just like okay, like yeah, like I was actually just talking to my wife today because about this. I was like, oh, it'd be so great because like in like these Latin mass missals, they have morning and evening prayers to pray, right? And
hmm
they're obviously customized for the laity, right? It's not the liturgy of the hours, it's not the divine office. Um, and so it's just like you have to bring that liturgical leisure into your home, right? So it's just like,
hmm
okay, like what does your liturgical leisure look like? It'd just be like praying a family rosary every night and saying grace before meals. You know what I mean? And like dad
hmm
blessing all the kids before they go to bed.
hmm
So I think I just to drive that home because the family, and I want to make this an episode too, where because the family is the building block of society, right? And
hmm
so religion starts in the home, and this is where we get into politics is deeply familial, right? And so liturgy starts in the home, and at mass obviously, and the parish is a home, right, and then the church is a home. Your country's supposed to be a home, and if it's not centered around a beautiful celebration of the liturgy, it's just going to kind of be bland. It's going to be blech.
Yeah, I mean, this is what people talk. I mean, I don't agree with the statement I'm about to say. I don't agree with it at all. But this is why you always see people saying that white people have no culture. It's because like they don't have like a liturgical expression of that culture. Like
Yeah.
I think white people do have a culture. The culture is Catholicism, right?
Yeah.
And it's what's been lost, unfortunately. So like liturgy is how you rediscover your identity every time in God, and you build up your culture. And since we have
Yeah.
turned away from God as a society, we have forgotten who we are, and it's this kind of this cultural dementia that's got us in the problem where we are today. And like the whole point of it
Yeah.
is to curb it by like doing this in remembrance of me. What our Lord says in the when he's instituting the Eucharist, where our Lord is going to be the one who restores our memory.
Yeah. I think we drove the point home enough.
There we go.
I
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we drove the point home enough. I was just thinking about it. I was like, oh man, when you told me about what Posada was, I was just thinking about. I was like, man, I was a little flamboyant there. I was like, oh, that's so lovely. I mean, like,
It
but
is.
it just warmed my
It's a
heart.
great tradition.
It warmed
Yeah.
my heart. I wore my heart. I didn't mean to sound, I didn't mean to sound, not masculine there, but it's
No, it's
just like
fun. I like
it
it.
just warmed my heart, dude. It just
Yeah.
warmed my heart. Yeah, I mean, so leash is the basis of culture. I actually kind of want to do another video format on this because there's another book I want to read about cosmic liturgy by Hans Urs von Balthasar, and obviously he has his
Yeah.
problems with like the whole like dare we hope. I mean, I don't think like saying
hmm
dare we hope that all people are saved is necessarily a bad thing, but
hmm
there's connotations to that could be really bad. Um,
Yeah.
because there will
Yeah.
be
I've been wanting to read that book. You and I should get
yeah
that book, and then
so
we should do
so
an episode on it.
so yeah so but there's some things in the future that might happen that we'll let you all know about when it comes to other video formats because I kind of want to get into this deeper in a more academic way, but this is just
hmm
kind of the intro as to why um why liturgy is so important, I think it's actually a political issue. I think when people say that liturgy is not a political issue, I think they're completely wrong. But I think that when
Mm-hmm.
people make it a political issue, they go about it in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
No,
it's
I agree.
like you're a ultra conservative Republican guy or whatever it is, or a neo-Nazi or whatever the heck it is, and
Mm-hmm.
or you're super liberal and like felt banners. Like no, like it's political, but in a very different way.
Yeah, because
It's
it's a
cultural.
debate about what the common good is.
Exactly.
About
It's
how
not a
how
debate
we all
about
flourish.
like who you vote for.
Yeah, I mean, like liturgy is much more than like what song you want to play. It's about how do we want to get our entire culture offered up to God as like a pleasing
Exactly.
sacrifice.
Exactly. And so yeah, I think that was a good. I think that covered all the bases. Just to kind of continue the plug, I'm gonna link our Instagram and our Twitters down below. Follow the Cristero party. Andrew, if you want to play the Cristero party quick, that'd be great.
Yep. Just a link in the description. Cristero Party is a political party, the Catholic political party, about implementing what the church teaches about politics into society, because the Republicans and the Democrats have failed everybody, and people are dying and going to hell, and we should change that. So that's kind of
seriously.
why we started the Cristero Party.
I just want everybody to go to heaven, man. I just want my culture to. I just want my little girl to grow up in a nice society. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you live in California.
I know.
But we're trying to change that. We're trying to change that every day.
Listen, like the corruption of the best is the worst. Like,
so
don't get
real.
me wrong. Okay, all right. Let me make this absolutely clear. Okay, I'm a New Englander. I love New England. I think it's the best part of the country. But California is inherently Catholic. Okay, you have San Diego after after the guy who saw, who saw Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? I'm pretty sure that would just make sense. And then you have Santa Barbara.
Well, no, it's not Juan Diego.
Oh, it's not Juan Diego. Okay, then I stink.
Yeah.
I stink. Anyways, Sacramento, the capital, the city of the Blessed Sacrament. Los Angeles, the city of the angels, right? Like San Bernardino, Saint Bernard, like, all these cities, dude, just like all about Catholicism. So it's inherently what is San Diego referring to then? Who is the saint that they're referring to?
It's like an obscure like saint, like San Diego de Alcala. Like he's like just a guy. He's not just a guy, saint, but
yeah, but that makes sense as to why it's called the mission of De Alcala or whatever it is.
Yeah, he was like a friar or something.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then what's it? Who is San Isidro then?
Saint Isidore the farmer.
Oh, really?
Isidro is Isidore,
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You guys can tell that
but
mi español es muy mal, mi amigo.
Mi español es muy mal, in the words of George Bush.
Yeah.
But it's like I mean, that's the thing about liturgy is like they named their cities after their saints because they showed up there, they said mass, and then they built a civilization.
Yeah. The la idioma de español es muy bonita.
Oh,
I'm done.
God bless him. Yeah.
God bless George Bush. I just gotta say it. Thank you, Your Holiness. Awesome speech. Dude, if you guys haven't seen that video, if you guys haven't seen that video of George Bush after Pope Benedict XVI gave a speech at the White House, George Bush just goes, "Thank you, Your Holiness. Awesome speech." And, you just gotta look at the videos of him. It's just like we're gonna stop those terrorists.
We need clips. We need Kate in the corner, clips. Prepping up clips.
Yeah, no, we gotta have Kate here, like Tim has Steph.
Like Tim has Steph, and she's just there, going on YouTube and pulling it up, and then we could just have it one day. One day,
honestly, like Steph and Kate just remind me a lot of each other.
They're pretty similar. I mean,
they're pretty similar.
I know you and your wife very well. I know Tim. I've known Tim and Steph for 8 years. You guys have similarities. You guys are both.
We do. I'm excited
my favorite couples to hang out with.
I appreciate that. I can't wait. I can't wait for Kate to meet Steph and Tim.
Yeah, one day.
One day. But anyways, just thank you guys for joining us. Merry Christmas. Continue to accept Christ into your hearts, especially at this great liturgical time. And eventually, like, we'll get more into this. I think this is just a good primer. Honestly, I don't see how we couldn't revisit this later on down the road.
Oh yeah, I had like so many notes about potential ways things we could talk about.
Yeah,
You,
dude. Like
barely hit any of them.
I wrote down notes, and I don't do that.
Yeah, like I like wrote a bunch of stuff. I was like, we didn't even get into like half of them, so this could be a whole bunch
so
of other stuff.
There'll have to be a part 2 to this, but that'll be a little while down the road.
Yeah,
maybe eventually we'll get to a point where we could do like 2 videos a week or something.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's the goal. That's the
goal. So everybody like, subscribe, and comment. Share with your friends.
The goal is 2 videos, YouTuber. And we have to mention this every video. The goal is also Anthony Abate.
He didn't respond to our tweets.
We have to keep pastoring Anthony Abate until it happens.
He didn't. Like, I don't want him to be like, he's probably sitting there like, dude, these guys are so weird. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to, like, I feel bad, but he also follows you on Twitter.
Yeah, he's gonna know it's a joke. Like he
knows it's like, I know. I just don't want to be like a fanboy, you know.
I'm not ashamed of my admiration for Anthony.
I'm not ashamed of my admiration for Anthony Abate, and I don't even know Rob's last name, but Rob is he's a cool dude too.
Rob Babylon is also
Rob Babylon. Rob avoiding Babylon. Yeah,
Robert A. Babylon is an American hero. Okay,
Babylon. Watch, like, we're gonna have like Tim and like you know, all those guys on Wagner. I feel like that'd be so funny. Just have Wagner. It'll be
a funny future. We're dragging it. So we don't know how to end shows.
We don't know how to end shows.
Our show is just like our phone calls, or it's just like we talk for hours.
Right.
So we just never.
It's not like I can move this over to locals. We're not even live streaming or anything like that.
Yeah, we're not.
I hope eventually we can. But anyways, all right, we gotta get the hell out of here.
You gotta. Everybody has to go to mass and be liturgical.
Go to mass, be liturgical, and like love Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Knock, Saint Padre Pio, and Saint Stanislaus, and we'll all be good. And Saint Boniface for the Germans.
Mm-hmm. White people do have culture. It's
White people do have culture. It's Jesus Christ. Okay, and the great thing about it is that eventually, white Americans can not only have Jesus Christ and Bass Pro Shop.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. Like, I want a ginormous statue of our Lord on top of Bass Pro Shop.
Atop the Bass Pro Shop, yeah.
I don't want to be blasphemous, but I don't think that is. I think that's actually making American culture better.
I think that's how we convert the South.
That's how actually, one last point. Just one singular last point.
Okay.
You ever notice on Twitter, actually, funny enough, speaking of Anthony Abate, he always posts like videos of like Catholics doing cultural things, and he's like whether it's like those guys in Spain with the pointy hats or whatever it is, like liturgical processions. And he's like, if every Catholic in America did this, Protestants would convert.
Mm-hmm.
He gets it.
It's true. It's true.
He gets it. Okay.
If we were just showing how cool we were, everybody would convert.
Exactly. It's just like showing the girl on the playground when you're 6 years old how fast you can run.
Yeah. That's the true culture, where the girls we impressed by running along the way.
Hey. Dude. All right, we're done. All right, thanks for joining, everybody. Bye-bye.